Hello, hello, everybody. It is Thursday, noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific, and that means it's time for MedTech Innovator Live. We're so glad you're here. Today, we'll be talking about an exciting topic. Let me briefly tell you, my name is Diane Buis. I'm here at MedTech Innovator, where I'm the director for the US program. Welcome to MedTech Innovator Live number 14 in this 2023 series of our weekly webinars that we do as part of the Accelerator program that runs for 4 months as an opportunity for the companies in the 2023 cohort, as well as the broader ecosystem, to learn about interesting topics. So for those who are joining us on the live stream, MedTech Innovator is the largest accelerator in medical devices in the world. And it's a downstream accelerator, which means that we're not looking for people with ideas, but for people with companies that are up and running, have teams, have prototypes, and early evidence that the technology works. And then partner them with experts in the industry, strategics and others, to help them bring that product or service to market as quickly and efficiently as possible, and especially with as much value as possible. And so we're opening up these webinars to the broader ecosystem beyond the cohort. And so if you're on this live stream, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And our team will funnel them my way if they're pertinent to the part of the conversation we're at. We'll definitely make sure to ask our panelists. Cohort companies, you can use the Q&A function, and we'll go into private Q&A after the end of the public section. And so with all of that said, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome folks who know the medical supply chain, and especially supply chain technologies, really well, and have a discussion around hospital supply chain and distribution channels. I will let them introduce themselves. I feel I can never quite do it justice. And we'll go in the order of Alicia Berenger and Brian Ford. Alicia is at Northwestern Medicine, and I'll hand her the virtual microphone in a second. And Brian Ford is at Cardinal Health. Alicia, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about your work and yourself.
Thank you, Diane. So yes, my name is Alicia Berenger. I am one of the directors in distribution and logistics and supply chain at Northwestern Medicine out of Chicago. I oversee all of the supply chain technology at Northwestern for the whole organization, as well as I lead a corporate strategy team for lab supply chain and a corporate strategy team for inventory management for the organization. And I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Brian, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Yes, excited to be here. So my name is Brian Ford. I am the Global Director of Customer Success for Cardinal Health WaveMark. So I have a team of account management and customer success professionals that support ongoing activities for WaveMark, which includes sustainment, renewal, and making sure that customers get the value from that solution. I've been in healthcare for about 18 or so years with several products such as Pyxis medication management and supply, Impress, which was under CareFusion, V. Mueller in surgical SPD tracking, so being able to track surgical instrumentation, and also in Cardinal Health's Value Link distribution. So a lot of different parts of supply chain I've had a chance to work with medical products and devices.
Fantastic. Really appreciate that. And so perhaps kind of just to level set, and Brian, maybe I'll start with you. Could you get us your view of the future, what a medical supply chain, what a hospital supply chain could look like, and then bring it back to where are we today, or perhaps even where have we been in the past? Where are the differences? Where are we? And then we'll let Alicia weigh in from her direct daily experience there.
Sure. I'll answer that in reverse. So I'll talk about supply chain. When I first got into healthcare, people said that change management in healthcare was tough. And I was like, of course it's tough. Everyone says that, right? But as I started off in Cardinal Health's Value Link distribution, I realized it was tough. There was a lot of hesitancy to use data in certain cases. There was a lot of just resistance to change management. There was a lot of disparate technologies. There were people who would do things on pen and paper. There was just old school ways of getting things done. And that was common across all the health systems I've seen across the US. I would say fast forward to today, we become very technology rich and even data rich. Sometimes we're still insight poor, but there's a lot of automation and technology that exists in supply chain today. There's so many innovative ways to try to automate and minimize the amount of physical labor you need to do things. However, I think there's still challenges with how to connect all of that data and technology and get meaningful insights to meaningful outcomes. And so to me, what does good look like? Good looks like having a ecosystem where you know where things are, you have the data to suggest what's going to happen, and you can be predictive with some of those things. And you're able to pivot and be able to trust the data that you're getting from all these technologies. And I think that's what good looks like today.
Great. Alicia, would you like to weigh in on that? What does good look like for you?
Yeah, so I actually agree with Brian. So even going back 5-10 years ago, from a supply chain perspective on the provider side, supply chain was looked at more as box pushers or shelf stockers. We weren't really looked at as innovative partners. And a lot of departments within both the supplier and even within the provider side don't really know what supply chain does, right? I think when COVID happened and a lot of the supply disruptions happened between 20 and 2021, a lot of departments leaned on supply chain, and they started looking to us to help answer some of the problems, help them through the time that they're not, used to. And so I think that what has changed over the years is supply chain has been elevated throughout not only suppliers' eyes, but also within providers, within the different departments and organizations within a hospital system. And through that, like Brian said, technology and data has been a big part of that. We've really, really taken data to drive collaborative conversations within the provider side. So between departments, a lot of times between clinical and supply chain, there's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of territory, or you don't know what I do and I don't know what you do, essentially. So what we've been able to do current state is, with the visibility of technology, have that rich data to sit down at the table and have the conversations on how can we continuously improve and how do we work together to not only meet your goals, but our goals. And what are those goals? Is there anything that we could be doing on our side to help you meet your bridge planning or your financial budget goals? And then what can you do from a workflow perspective to help my downstream workflow and impact? So I think what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years is working more together than siloed apart. And that includes even with suppliers. A lot of times, from a provider side, you don't want to share too much because you're afraid they'll share with other customers. And again, it's a competitive world, right? But I think over time, we've kind of had to learn to work together, especially going through all the supply disruptions, the pandemic. We've had to learn to lean on each other and become more open and transparent around our business goals and our challenges, so we can actually work to improve them together and not apart. So I think now we're good because we're starting to be more transparent, collaborative, and communicate a lot better, both internally and externally.
I appreciate that. And it tees up discussions around supply chain. We recently had a webinar around as a company, if you're building a product, you have your own supply chain, and you have to look to resiliency and redundancy in your vendors otherwise you let your customers down. In many ways, the customer may be different internally, but I'm sure that is something that applies to your world as well. Can I just stay with you, Alicia, and talk a little bit about product redundancy, and redundancy is sometimes considered a dirty word, but having several sources for a product, having several vendors for a product, and general supply chain resilience, and some of the recent learnings or some of your views on them.
So yeah, I think in the past, there was really a drive for leaning down your product portfolio, your how many vendors you have in a hospital, because when you have too many, sometimes that can create unstandardization and waste, right? So you don't want to have too many options. And so I think over the years, we've really put a focus in healthcare of leaning down. Well, with all of the supply disruptions we have come across in the last few years, and things that are out of a lot of our controls with manufacturing and sourcing from a goods perspective, we've had to relook at what does resilient look like. And I think anybody on this call or anyone you talk to in the healthcare space has a different definition of what is resilient. So for us, I think it's been more of not only looking at risk perspective, how do we take our products, our product lines, our portfolios, and actually rate them from highest to lowest risk? And within those, work with our distributing partners, our manufacturing partners to create alternate options, if this, then that type of scenario, and start opening up the amount of options we have a little bit, so we don't find ourselves in a position where we solely put our business into one vendor and then something happens and then we are the ones that are scrambling to try to keep up with patient care and keeping our patients safe and risk-free. So I think over the years, it's changed the way we've looked at resiliency and the way we've looked at our partnerships and our contracts, to start asking more questions of, where do you get your raw goods from? Where are your plants at? Do you foresee risk? And then what is your contingency plan if a risk were to occur? So I think that when it comes to resiliency and redundancy, it's not so much changing the way we're doing it, but changing the questions we're asking, so that we are more prepared to understand if something were to happen in another company, another manufacturer. We know cyber risk right now. Like, we're starting to ask the questions to understand what is their contingency plan to keep risk. And then if something happens, which we know always something will, what is their plan to mitigate it? And then being completely transparent with us as a customer, so that we can make better business decisions to protect us and our patients if anything were to go wrong. So I think that's where the conversation has changed over the years, is, with everything we've kind of learned over the last few years, it's changed the conversations and changed the transparency around those conversations.
Brian, what does that look like for you?
Sure. A lot of what Alicia just said, it's a different conversation. The thing that comes to my mind is it's not one size fits all when we think about resiliency. Having insight matters. Like, certain products you do want to have a stockpile of, and other products you want to be accurate as possible because there's value there. And so being able to get to the right outcomes, I think, is where all the health systems want to get to. And having the information to do that is sometimes the trickiest piece. I know, as working for Cardinal Health, it is important for us, just to have diverse vendors and redundancies as we source for hospitals, our own internal suppliers. We want to have a rich pool of suppliers that we go to and we grade and we do all the things to qualify. But ultimately, it comes down to, we need to provide things for the hospital so that they can provide things for patients. And so at the end of the day, understanding that the end goal is to get to a better patient outcome is where my company, Cardinal Health, is really focused on. But I can see where, again, there's a lot of narratives around some hospitals want to have their own consolidated service center because they feel they can own more of their supply chain and control what's happening. Then other hospitals are still moving towards just-in-time distribution and trying to lean out all that they can. And so sometimes those are conflicting things, and both models could actually work. I think it comes down to having the right products at the right time, and knowing what those are is really how you can get there.
I'd love to come back in a minute to the differences between different types of hospitals. To you, Brian, I think that's an interesting one to pull on a little bit, what the different challenges are. But I think part of what we're talking about is as well, and you have both teed this up, is technology to manage your supply chain. And so I'd love to get a little bit of a view. Alicia, I know that the two of you work together, and so part of it is really how do you use technology and to really manage your supply chain, to and how do you choose it, how do you manage it, what do you use?
Yeah, so for us at Northwestern, we really over the last 6 years have put a huge focus on supply chain technology, really developing that clinical supply chain. So no longer being clinical and supply chain, but creating an environment and a relationship to bridge the two together. And the way we've been able to do that is with technology that gives us that visibility to have those business decisions and those candid conversations. So at Northwestern in particular, we first saw a big opportunity in our surgical procedural spaces around high dollar products. A lot of those products, it wasn't standard from site to site on who managed inventory from which department. Was it clinical, ordering, and managing their own recalls, expirations, and orders, or was it supply chain? We tend to see a disconnect. Supply chain would manage more of the low dollar inventory, and clinical, especially in the procedural spaces, were managing their own high dollar physician preference inventory. So what we really wanted to focus on was standardizing that and taking all of that administrative burden off of our clinical staff so they could focus on patient care, making sure that patients were first and not worrying about a product on a shelf. So we partnered with Cardinal Wavemark to introduce RFID technology into our surgical and procedural departments. And what that did was give us the availability and the ability to have this visibility into our high dollar products across our organization. How much do we have? Where do we have it? When does it expire? Is it recalled? Having that opportunity to not only have visibility, but tie inventory to utilization. In a provider space, a lot of our business decisions were based on purchase history. And if a clinical person is managing their own inventory, a lot of times their purchases are higher and they take longer to burn it off. They want that just in case type product versus that just in time. So when we partnered with Cardinal Wavemark, we gave that visibility to the inventory to help it easier for supply chain to manage. We know where it's expiring and when, and we don't have to do the manual process of pen and paper to try to find it. If there's a recall, we know exactly where it's living. We can go right to that. So it cuts down a lot of that waste of time. But also the biggest piece was introducing a point of care system inside these surgical suites where clinical would actually document on these Wavemark stations. And what that would do is it would interface over to your EHR. So there's no double documenting, but at the same time, it's reducing your inventory. So from a supply chain perspective, right away, we would tie our utilization to the patient to the inventory management. If you used it, we know we have to reorder it versus in the past, you would go to a location and you would kind of say, it looks a little bare, maybe I have to order it. Or sometimes ordering off of a package that a clinical person would give you, a use one, reorder one. So what the technology did is it gave us that visibility to say, we can run data and analytics from a true utilization perspective, not a purchasing perspective, because there's a big disconnect there, but also the turnaround time to reorder these products and get them back on the shelves for our clinical partners and our patients were a lot faster. Also within that, from a supply chain technology, we partner with Cardinal Wavemark to really focus on the products on the shelf and making sure that we have visibility into our tissue, to our high dollar products, and standardize the compliance around all of that. Then we also partnered with a company called CaseCheck to really look at our products that aren't on the shelf, things that are being brought in by vendor reps for cases. So tray items, ortho, neuro, those type of items that are walked in and that we as supply chain don't order and manage. So that was another technology that we saw was really important because a lot of our money is tied up into vendor-owned, vendor walked-in product. And we needed better visibility around that as well so that we could, as an organization, make better business decisions and continuously improve. And then our low dollar inventory, we really kind of looked at what we could do internally and we built kind of a customization for a tube and Kanban in our ERP system. So with now, that we're 6 years into it, when we look at our products, we not only have visibility and technology internally with low dollar inventory, but we have it with high dollar physician preference inventory. And now we also have it with inventory we don't own that comes into our hospitals and used on our patients.
Brian, would you want to jump in and add anything to that? Otherwise, I'm happy to take you in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I know one of the challenges is having so many systems too. And I know one of the things that my company, we look at is how can we do all things, do enough to be the one system. So for low dollar, for high dollar, for medium dollar, for any type of products that you have coming through that is managed by supply chain, how can we have our technology be the platform that gives all that visibility? And so that's something that we have a vision we strive to do, and we do today, and being able to showcase that we have that one system. But that is I think a challenge across supply chain today is now there's a lot of disparate technologies, and they all can be good in little pieces, but how do you pull them all together? How do you integrate them so that the ease of use for your supply chain and for your hospitals becomes easier versus having to remember, for this product, I do this, for this product, I do that, for this department, I do something different. Helping with some of that standardization is something that my company is focused on right now, and that is, I think, is still a problem across the U.S. Acute healthcare space, because there's just a lot of things that are out there, a lot of systems and a lot of technologies.
I'll stay with you for a second. Thanks for that, for that, Brian. When I'm thinking about many of the companies listening to the conversation, some of the questions are really, I'm launching a new product. How should I get into a hospital supply chain, right? And so one of the ways to do that is to work with a partner like yourself. And so some of the questions I get is when you're launching a new product, how much market share should you already have before partnering with someone? And that is, going to group purchasing organizations, partnering with technology partners and distribution partners to reach scale, right? Especially as a small company, you don't have reps in every state. So if we're scaling across the US first, and then maybe we can talk about more broadly international then. But do you have a view on how much market share should somebody have before approaching partners?
I do, and it really does depend on the product and your target market. So it does matter what the product does. Is it a commodity, or is it a technology? Is it a device that has to go through regulatory? So all of those factors matter. I think that the first thing is you got to prove that it works. So you have to find a early adopter, a hospital that wants to be an innovator, and have them prove out and partner with you to show that this actually works. And then from there, you have to prove that it works again. And there's a book called Crossing the Chasm that talks really about this in detail. But in order to get to the bigger pool, you have to have enough people that validate that this works. As far as GPOs, GPOs want to bring as much value as they can to their members. And so if you have a product that is going to create a great return or a great outcome for its members, I think whether you have 2 or 3 hospitals or you have 30 hospitals, if there's value there and you have a great value proposition, it is worth going through and talking to GPOs to figure out if you can partner through their channels to help not only promote the product and get it on contract, but obviously get value for their members. And so value creation is really where the question should be there. It's, do you have enough value? Can you prove value in order to get other people to buy into that? The second part of that question is whether you go direct or go through distributors or go through a partnership. And I think that definitely depends. There are some partnerships that are great, and there are some partnerships that become competitors. And so understanding that landscape, understanding what the scale is that you're approaching for your target market, I think is more important than just trying to pick a vendor, say, hey, I want to partner with Cardinal Health. I want to get to all their distribution customers. There's a downside to that. What if the relationship distribution doesn't go well? Now you lose that customer, and vice versa. So it's important to understand, again, your target market, but at the core, it's about having value. If your product is creating value and you can prove it and repeat it, then I think going through all the channels you can to scale is worthwhile doing in terms of going to GPOs.
That tees up value squarely, and that's something I wanted to ask Alicia about anyway. The MedTech Innovator cohort has just gone through a value program that we do as part of the cohort, and so I want to get a better understanding. So we talk a lot about value analysis committees, because you have to prove your value, just like Brian just said. So we talk about clinician poll to get in front of a value analysis committee. Where does supply chain live with respect to the value analysis committee? How does that work?
Yeah, so speaking just on behalf of Northwestern Medicine, value analysis lives under supply chain. So for us, supply chain at Northwestern consists of many lanes. You have contract sourcing and value analysis, you have purchasing and master data, and you have logistics and operations. So you have multiple lanes or pillars under supply chain at Northwestern. So when it comes to value analysis, we have a very, very robust, well-led value analysis program in which products are evaluated not only as supply chain just being the facilitator, but it's really consisted of physicians and clinical operations leaders that are the sole decision makers. Again, they're the ones that have to use the product. We and supply chain would never want to make a decision on what we go with and then have a negative downstream impact to not only their day-to-day operations, but also to our patients. So from a, excuse me, a value analysis perspective, we facilitate it.
And that is, I am so sorry. This will make me drink a glass of water momentarily. Brian, this is my chance to ask you potentially how things compare. Just because you have, you've been in the field for a long time and you work with different hospital systems. And so I recognize that you may not want to go into specifics for different hospital systems, but I'd love to hear your high-level view on how do value analysis committees and supply chain work together in different places.
Sure. As Alicia alluded to, I've seen value analysis be part of supply chain. I've seen them be a separate pillar under like finance themselves. And so in having different functions within that committee, I think it's a broader topic. So like if a hospital wanted to bring in a new technology, for example, they could put together a team that would create an RFP, and that has value analysis in it. They have clinical stakeholders, they have supply chain stakeholders, and they evaluate that technology across all the different functions, and everyone has a voice in that. And I've seen that happen through a lot of health systems now. That is the way that they buy an expensive technology. They would go through that process of value analysis and through an RFP process. What I've seen, the way it's used day to day is that a value analysis committee can figure out product standardization or SKU rationalization. So they can get together monthly, pull data from a technology and be able to say, hey, for these type of cases, these surgeons are using this product versus these surgeons are using another product. These are cheaper and they have the same outcomes or better outcomes. So why are we buying the more expensive product? And they use that committee to attack and create initiatives to go after some of that product standardization and then work with the clinical teams to make that switch. And so there's other factors that they look into in terms of what the priority is for that health system, but I've seen it be effective across Again, just from commodity products up through buying $1 million technology that can be part of a transformation initiative.
And you just mentioned switching. So, I want to, Alicia, if there's anything that you'd like to add to, value committee and supply chain. Otherwise, I'm happy to kind of go more towards how do we. Oh, I lost my train of thought. My apologies. This is one of those. This is one of those mornings. Switching, that's what it was. So really, now that somebody has convinced the value analysis committee, this is my product is going to be better for the patient. It's going to save clinician time. It is better, faster, cheaper, all of the good things, value across the board. Then it's a matter of getting that product on a shelf. And that might mean switching away from a previous one. What does that look like? What does conversion look like? What are some of those timelines? That's often hard for a first-time entrepreneur to understand. How does anything ever get into a hospital? I'll stay with you, Brian, first.
Sure. So for a product itself, that varies again too, because for a product, more important than the value analysis team, you want to make sure the clinicians that are using that product really are behind you too. So you got to have some advocates that actually want to at least trial it to even get it in there, right? And so that part of it is a little bit different. But for technology, and that's where I really, I spent a lot of my career in deploying technologies. It is change management is to take one system out and go to another system is quite the painful task. And so being able to kind of synchronize swim and have one system still work while this system is being built, and then the switch over from another system where products live, where are the interfaces working, that whole change management piece has to be managed through really, I think, quality project management. And there's a lot of steps that happen in a conversion like that. And so technology conversions, again, I think are different than just product conversions. Oftentimes, product conversions are done at a mass scale, especially like distribution wise. If you go from one distributor to another, there's a project that goes along with that, but that is a lot of data moving back and forth, even though it's painful. I think the technology side of it, and again, where I specialize, I can see where some hospitals have done it really well, and we've been able to partner with them to get through it. And I see where hospitals struggle through that transition, and it takes them much longer to get the value from the new technology they're trying to move to because of just that implementation process.
I'm going to ask you the same question, Alicia, but perhaps with an added wrinkle of is, especially in a larger hospital system, does getting something into a hospital through a value analysis committee into a hospital translate to now you're in, quote unquote, with the entire system?
So that's actually, it's a very interesting question because it could differ from organization to organization. At least for us at Northwestern, the answer is no. Every department and every hospital has their own financial goals. And so for us to say a product line is approved at one hospital or one department, that it's approved for all, we would never want to do that without having it go back through value analysis and be approved. Because just because our one product line works, we might not do those cases or those surgeries or their specialties in every department at every hospital. And so we wouldn't want any of our clinical operations or leaderships to be surprised by something that gives them, sorry, that has a financial impact on them without their approval.
I appreciate that. So perhaps let's talk a little bit about how care is changing. We're seeing a lot of, and a lot of innovation is what I'm going to call pushing care downstream, that is from an inpatient procedure to an outpatient procedure, from in-hospital, perhaps even to emergency care or home care. Hospital at home is a big topic we see. How does that generally affect planning? How does that affect purchasing? How does that affect supply chains? Can I go to you first, Brian?
Yeah, you can actually. I wanted to go back just to the previous question. It's a little bit around, does one hospital mean that you'll get it across the whole idea and the whole system? And oftentimes with technology, it goes into doing a pilot or even proof of concept. If you are able to get into one hospital or one department and you have success, now you have that department potentially being a cheerleader for you to push that technology across the system. So, and that's oftentimes I've seen how technologies do grow and you get to a point where you have an enterprise deployment, but it starts with one. And so from a technology perspective, and again, every hospital generally has their own budget. They have their own decision makers, unless they have a consolidated leadership team where the enterprise is managed at a higher level. So I just wanted to go back to Alicia was talking through. Not every, just because you get in one hospital doesn't mean you're going to go across the system. And technology, getting one hospital could be the difference between you and a competitor, because if you can prove that you're working in one of the hospitals and everyone can understand the why and they can see it and get feedback, I think it becomes easier to kind of sell that success across the rest of the system. But that's mainly for technology, not for just any one product.
I can see that. I'm going to just briefly stay with you and come back to the how and Alicia, please feel free to weigh in on that one. As we're seeing care change, how does that affect supply chains? How does that affect planning as we see care move more out of the clinic, some at home monitoring? How do we see how does that affect supply chains and planning?
I think just always being up to date with how our society is changing, how healthcare is changing, and working together as an organization to understand what are our core tenets for what success looks like. And again, it's always patients first. So with healthcare changing a little bit and sometimes going to home care, you have virtual telemedicine, different avenues where we're getting outside of, even today, a lot of people go to immediate cares or urgent cares over scheduling with their regular physicians. So it's just being in constant communication, having an organization that from the top executive leadership down communicate where the industry is going and then what our goals are at our organization. And then how in supply chain, again, it goes along with that collaboration and communication, making sure that supply chain is at the table to understand where the organization is going. So when it comes to buying decisions and partnering with our vendors and our distribution, that we are prepared to talk future state and not just what's happening right now. So I think that's a big one, is a lot of times in supply chain, at least even on the logistics side, we don't always know what's going to be happening and what's happening. And that's where it's really important to have such tight relationships, not only with our executive leaders at the healthcare organization, but also with our partnered vendors like Cardinal or your distributor or your vendors that are out in the space, so they can also tell you what's up and coming that could potentially have a downstream impact to your organization.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, as Alicia alluded to, it's all about the patient and trying to get to the best outcomes. And so if home care or whatever that treatment plan is for that patient leads to a better outcome, then obviously everyone wants to support that. I think that the change for supply chain could be the product mix. Like what do you stock in a hospital may be slightly different in the future, right? And so being able to have that data and predictive analytics to say these type of cases are now done a certain way, or certain kind of care is going to be at home. We don't have to stock as many here because they're not going to be, getting their care in the hospital building. So I think the mix of products could change, and that's just me hypothesizing there. But ultimately, it's being able to be predictive and like Alicia said, understanding what's changing with care. we could easily have something happen and like, hopefully knock on wood, another pandemic where everyone comes back into the hospital, right? And now all of a sudden everyone's scrambling to get the right products for the right cases again. And so being able to just predict what's happening and having data to support, what decisions you need to make, I think that's going to continue to happen regardless if care moves to the home.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add to that too is, what does delivery of product to our patients look like and to our caregivers? Because again, if it goes to home care, it's no longer us just stocking a shelf at a hospital. We have to get that product to our patients, to their homes. So now we have to really start partnering with our courier services and our courier providers to understand, what does that model look like of making sure that we, like today, we have the right product, the right quantity, at the right time on our shelves, but what does that look like when then you have to deliver that care outside of your organization's walls into a patient's home? So again, having those open conversations and starting to look to the future to say, is this going to be a trend, and staying ahead of it so that we already have a lot of those things worked out if and when it comes time for that.
So when we're talking about that change, something that comes up in my mind is that might also make some items, some products less relevant. I know you mentioned lean. Both of you mentioned lean in the past. Lean also means less waste. Let's talk a little bit about waste. I know that is something that you, Alicia, have been working diligently towards waste reduction. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So we actually partner a lot with Cardinal Wavemark and the RFID items that we have in our inventory, because we have the best visibility to that subset of product at our hospitals. And we're able to really look at how much are we expiring out and why. Not only on the reactive side, but on the proactive side, utilizing that data to foresee what's at risk of expiration. Look at PAR management, what has low utilization, slow and no moving items. Again, using that data to bridge that gap of communication and that partnership between clinical and supply chain. We in supply chain see this or that. Let's now talk to clinical and say, is this an item that is absolutely needed on the shelf? Did a doctor leave? Did we bring on a new doctor? What are the upstream workflow of these items, and understanding what they need. They could say the item has to be on the shelf, but do we need 50 of them? Maybe we only need 5. So really looking again, now that we have the visibility and that true utilization and not just purchase history, we can start using the data to drive better PAR management and more communication and collaboration if a doctor leaves or we introduce a new product line and that one we're phasing out. I think also when it comes to products that we just simply cannot burn off, true items that will go to waste from an each perspective, we have a couple avenues. We're really starting to lean on our partner vendors. Can we swap out product for one that we use? Can we return it for credit? And if not, we don't want the product to go to waste. So we really want to focus on how do we partner with companies like Project Cure that will take any obsolete product on our shelf and be able to reutilize it in other countries and other organizations, other hospital systems that might not have the financial backing to put some of these products on their shelves. Using it for training, using it for education for clinical staff, EMTs. So finding other ways. So Northwestern is really big in the community of finding where we could put these products so that they're not truly going to waste, and doing it in a fashion that it's before they become waste. And then if they are at the point of expiration, where can they go? Like they said, testing, training, education. And then also we partner with distributors to also reduce the cardboard waste. How do we get things in totes, things that can be re-cleaned and we are not constantly having to break down cardboard and throw it away and add to the landfills? So we're trying to find ways to not only reduce waste from a physical product perspective, but also utilizing our technologies and our data to reduce waste from a time perspective and a resource perspective and a workflow perspective. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about waste, we talk about physical hard dollar product that goes to waste, which is extremely important. But throughout all of the process of continuous improvement, we also want to find ways to reduce waste and time for our staff so that they can focus on what's important and not have to spend a lot of time pulling expired product on the shelf. How do we get ahead of that and be more proactive?
Yeah, I think Alicia said it really well. From my side of the house, or being a manufacturer that deploys a solution that helps support waste reduction, it's how do we make sure that we're giving Alicia the right insights? Like, are we giving the right data? Like, if something is expiring, is it because it was short dated from your vendor, or is it bad FIFO, or bad just product movement management? So being able to provide those insights, because the only way things change is if you become intentional. They're not just going to magically fix themselves usually. So you have to be intentional and set goals, set benchmarks, and then measure if you're actually getting better in certain areas. And if you're not getting better, that's okay. Figure out why. And figure out, is it certain manufacturers, is it certain types of cases, are certain things seasonal, where every year we waste so many products? What can we do for next year during this seasonal cycle? So I think those insights become really valuable, but at the core, you have to be intentional. And so I know Alicia, I give her a lot of props because they've had initiatives where they said, we want to address this, and they're able to put a flashlight in where they've had challenges and try to clean up those challenges. So it does take health systems being intentional to do that.
That is excellent. We're coming close to the end of the webinar, and so I want to make sure that I ask how both of you interact with startups in the MedTech space. So, is there advice you have for early or mid-stage companies in how to approach either you or your organization, but more broadly, how to, and so you've spoken to, you've got to prove value, but, and so is it largely physician pull? How should innovators approach you or your organizations?
Maybe I'll take that one first.
Yeah.
So Cardinal Health is a very big company, and we do a lot of innovation. But ultimately, WaveMark itself, the company, the division that I work for, was a startup that Cardinal Health purchased, right? And it became and got the investment from a bigger distributor company, and now we have this great product, right? And so there are always those opportunities where we look for differentiating technology, something that maybe we couldn't build in-house, or we're trying to build in-house, but it takes a longer time to do. And I think startups can be more agile and build something quickly and get to a solution faster than a bigger company. And so I think those opportunities certainly do exist if you have the right niche technology or the right problem that you're solving that other people can't seem to solve quick enough. I think that's one of the channels you can go through. Yeah, and I'll stop there. I'll pass to Alicia.
No, I agree with that. And just to go back to a little bit about what Brian said before, is value. So I think the game changer is not creating something with the customer in mind for a customer, but actually building it with the customer. Utilizing a customer to build something that will actually meet their needs and what you think needs are going to be met. So that in turn would have a customer essentially market and speak on your behalf to say, they built this with us. They wanted to build something not for a customer, but with a customer. And the customer then will become, like Brian said before, they'll be the one to sell it for you. In that space, whenever you come in as a vendor, a supplier, a technology developer, with a provider, you always know that there is some sort of financial gain from them, right? That they're going to try to sell you something. And so even though you believe them, you at the back of your mind, you're always wondering, like, okay, is that true? When it comes from a customer, we don't have anything to gain from that. And so I think that's a really smart decision for startups, is to really try to find a way to partner with your target market to which the problem will be solved, whether that be physicians, supply chain, nurses, whatever that may be. that's, I think, where that collaboration can come from, is really working with them to get their feedback. And once they're bought in, they can help you kind of get in the door wherever you need to go. I think also, going to conferences, going to, any of these meetings where customers will be at, and just have a booth and ask questions. I think the more you can get out there and ask, what is the problem? Even if you think you know what you want to solve, go ask what your target audience, what the problem really is. And then try to go backwards and solve to that, because I think that's another thing too, is no one really asks. We know a general problem. When you go actually ask a customer, whoever your customer may be, you might get a different answer, or you might get something that you didn't think about that could just take your company or your product to the next level. And like Brian said, set you apart from everybody else. When you go out into spaces, a lot of these conferences, you see multiple companies selling the same thing. How do you stand apart from your competitors out in that space? And a lot of times it's really asking the question enough times to where you get a different answer, and then work backwards to see if you could solve for that.
That is excellent advice, and we appreciate it. With that, I really want to thank you, and we'll conclude the public version of the webinar and bid our online audience goodbye. Pleasure having you. You can find the other webinars on YouTube. I hope you'll join us again. Wishing you a great day. Please join us again.